Hello, my name is Jessica Klimesh. I'm a creative writer, writing coach, and editor. And today I'm going to talk to you about how you can spot bad writing advice. What are some red flags to look for? When I taught academic writing and grammar at the university level, one of the things that I would talk to my students about was to avoid absolutes and generalizations, essentially, to avoid statements that would be things like everyone knows, or everyone does this, nobody does this, those kinds of absolutes. This was generally within the discussion about modals, words that can soften statements and thereby strengthen arguments or make writing more effective, make formal writing more effective. And I wanted to qualify that with formal writing because there are instances when absolutes and overgeneralizations might be appropriate. It always depends on what you're writing. You know, what's the genre? Is it formal, informal, fiction, nonfiction, that kind of thing. I have degrees in communication, organizational communications, technical communication, mass communications, and none of this makes me a perfect communicator. It does, however, give me some insight into communication and what to look for when people are speaking, the language that they use. It gives me perspective and allows me to decode rhetoric, essentially, because I've also studied rhetoric and I've taught rhetoric at the university level as well. And so here's the thing, whenever I hear people say, every writer needs to do this, or you have to do this to be an effective writer, those kinds of things, and I've actually heard these kind of statements very, very often over the last 25 years, by other writers, in fact. But these kind of statements immediately put me on alert, because of the absolutes and the generalizations. Because the writing process, the creative process, is different for everyone. Everyone learns differently, everyone processes information differently, everyone expresses themselves differently. We all have different schedules, different routines, different ways of being. So something I'm always emphasizing is that the craft of creative writing is not about rules. So if someone gives you a craft rule that says you need to do this in your writing, or every writer does this, this is a red flag, especially if it's a generalized statement, if it's not specific to your particular work. That's something to be leery of. And so I want to talk briefly about writing advice as it relates to writing routines and habits, because this is another area where you hear these kinds of absolutes. Like, I've often heard that, oh, writers have to get up at 5:30 every morning and write for 2 hours if they want to be productive, if they want to get stuff done. Or writers have to write every single day, or they should write 1,000 words a day. And my response is, hell no. I chose this field, this writing and editing field, specifically because I don't want to get up at 5:30 every morning. It's hard for me to get up at 7 in the morning twice a week to go to the gym. And I would not be very productive if I was trying to write that early in the morning either. That's just not how it works for me. Kudos to those who can get up that early. And as far as writing every single day, for the last few years, I've done the flash fiction version of NaNoWriMo because I'm a flash fiction writer. So what this means is that in November, when other people are doing NaNoWriMo, writing their novels, I'm writing a flash fiction draft a day, 30 drafts in 30 days. Most of my drafts are like 500 words or fewer. So they're not very long. Sometimes the drafts might take me only like 20 minutes to write. They're just first drafts, something to come back to later. But let me tell you, this routine of writing every single day for 30 days, even if it's just 20 minutes a day, is exhausting, and it's not sustainable for me. And it's not something that I can maintain longer than a month, or on and off here or there. It's just not a reasonable routine for me. And you might be different, and that is okay. As I note time and time again, it always comes down to your goals as a writer. For example, if you're trying to write a first draft of a novel, yeah, you might want to write 1,000, 2,000 words a day, every day, or almost every day. My point is that if you are getting up at 5:30 in the morning to write for 2 hours merely because you think that this makes you a serious writer, stop. Or if you're writing every single day, if you're writing 1,000 words a day, every single day because you're like, this is what I have to do to be a writer, stop, because that's not a valid reason. You have to look at your goals and what your reasons are for maintaining such a routine. And I'll also add that an important aspect of this is that generating new work is only one small part of writing, of the writing process. I spend probably most of my writing time revising. I might spend an hour tweaking a sentence or a paragraph that I'm working on a short story or, flash fiction story. And I would say most of my time is spent doing this kind of micro revision, looking at each word, each piece of punctuation, taking a lot of time to figure out if this sentence is the way I want this sentence to be. That to me is the heart of writing. Revision is a much larger part of writing than actually getting the first draft down. Most of writing is revision. The other thing about looking for writing advice is to consider who is giving you the writing advice. So a lot of famous writers will be like, well, this is what I did, and this is what you should do too to be a productive or effective writer. But we have to look at context. And again, like what your goals are, but how is it applicable to you? And some of this advice too is that, especially like maybe the more famous writers will give, is a lot of generic writing advice, like show don't tell, or don't use adverbs, or whatever. And you might be thinking, well, this is what Stephen King says he does, so it must be right because look at him, he's Stephen King. But you have to look at what you write and consider, is this going to work for me? So for example, in flash fiction, if I'm taking advice from someone who does not write flash fiction and they're just giving me generic writing advice, well, every story needs an arc, which in flash fiction is not necessarily true. This generic advice can be misleading at best. But to kind of sum up, the red flags to look for are advice that uses absolutes like never or always, and generic advice. These kinds of cliches that you hear a lot of writers spouting off, and these kind of cliches that you hear a lot. And I talk more about this in my video, Worst Writing Advice, as well. But then the third thing is to consider the context. Who is giving you the advice? What do they write? How does it relate to what you write? And how does it relate to your goals? Is it applicable to you? Because even if a famous writer gives you advice, if they haven't looked at your work, if they don't know anything about your work, it might be worthless advice. It might have worked for them, but it might not work for you. The best writing advice, and I've mentioned this in several of my previous videos as well, is writing advice that is specific to the work at hand. So forget about the absolutes that everybody should do this and nobody should do this or whatever. Forget the generic advice and simply consider the context and how it is applicable to you. The best writing advice is critically thought out feedback about the specific work at hand. Writing is not easy, and writing well is even harder. So it can be tempting to latch onto these rules and these simple things, this advice that sounds so simple and easy to do. because, oh, this is going to be the magic bullet that makes my writing pop. But writing doesn't work like that. It's not simple, and it does take a lot of dedication and hard work. So when people try to simplify it with these easy rules and generic advice, they're making something sound easy that really isn't easy, because writing does take hard work. But you can do it. And if you have writing questions, if you are stuck in the writing process or the creative process, check out my Writing Coach Power Hour. It's a new offer that I have where you can give your writing a boost in just 1 hour. For more details, go to my website, jessicaklimesh.com. As always, I hope you found this video useful. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.